In this video, I'm going to show you how I like to clean up address lists for envelope address printing before I do data merges. I have another tutorial on data merge. If you're not familiar with how to turn something like this into a well-formatted envelope printing document, definitely check that one out. So we're going to start here, and I am in Google Sheets, which is very similar to Excel. A lot of these same formulas and things can be used in Numbers if you have a Mac, or you can always get Google Sheets as well, even if you're on a Mac. Getting really familiar with these formulas and how you can update these address lists for what you need can help you so much, because sometimes it just takes a long time to send it back to the client. The client doesn't understand what you're asking them to do. They don't really know how to use Excel or follow the template that you send them, no matter how clear you are. And sometimes it can just be quicker to go through and do some of this yourself if you need to. So let's dive in. So this is a list that I got for a bridal shower. I have changed all the addresses, so everything on here is fake. So you'll see a few things with this list that are a little bit weird. We have this number count. We definitely don't want that in the final data merge. Then in this column, we have the word address, colon, space. We don't want that. We have a few commas over here. Sometimes we spelled out things like drive and sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we have the apartments here. It's not spelled out. So a lot of things we would change here. And then city, state, zip are in the same column. Sometimes that is fine, but sometimes it's not. And then you'll see our format is not always correct. So we have no comma here, and we do have a comma in this one. So we do want to just make sure all of those are correct. And then we'll have a few things like this just says Raleigh over in this column. Obviously they split it up. So when I'm going through, I'm going to notice a few things like that. And if it's just one thing that needs to be fixed, I'm just going to manually fix it. That took 2 seconds. It was really not worth sending it back or stressing over that. If there's something that you're not really sure how it's supposed to go, of course, reach back out to your client, because people's names can be spelled weird, all kinds of stuff. Now, a lot of what we're going to do is with find and replace, and then like split text columns and a few other little formulas. So let's go ahead and do some of the easy ones. So right here we have the number of children in parentheses, and the only options are 1 and 2. So I'm just going to select this column and click Control F, which is our find, and then we click those 3 little dots to get this find and replace. So in this column, which as you can see, we have our specific range here, fake A through A, so that's just column A. We're going to find anything that's parentheses to parentheses, and we're going to replace it with nothing. So replace all. Now all of those 2 parentheses went away, and we're just going to do the same thing with parentheses 1, parentheses, replace all. Done. That was super easy. And we're going to do kind of the same thing over here with this word address. Now the important thing is we don't want like those first spaces, we don't want the colon, etc. So we're going to include address, colon, space. Make sure you put that space in the find column, replace with nothing again. And if you want to like match case or any of these things, you can absolutely do. There's so many other capabilities here, but for this particular thing, all we need to do is just replace it with nothing. And what I'm noticing here is that some of them still have a space there. So I'm actually going to undo that and redo it. What I think is happening is some of them had 2 spaces. So we'll have address, colon, space, space. We'll replace that with nothing, do replace all. And you see that didn't capture all of them because they weren't all 2 spaces. You'll start with the larger one, and I'll explain why in just a second. And then we'll do address, colon, space, and replace all. And as you can see, we have now cleaned up that whole thing. None of them have that first space. We'll do something similar to get rid of these commas. The only other commas in this column are sometimes between the street and the apartment, which doesn't bother me if that's gone. So I'm just going to find all of the commas in this column, replace them with nothing, and now you can see they're all good. We still will need to just separate those, but that's not a huge deal. And then we have a few things here that we want to fix, and this is where it can start getting tricky. So we'll do our find and replace, and we want to replace all of these DRs with drive. However, what happens when you're doing that is there is a DR in the word drive, and we already have one up here. So what that's going to do is replace that DR with the word drive, and there might be DRs sometimes in the names of the streets, etc. So if we replace all, what you can see happened is we accidentally have a few of these drives, The easiest way that I have found to just take care of those is just take care of them. If you see drive I've, just replace that with drive as well. It's really not that difficult, but then you do want to do just a quick scroll through and you'll see really, really easily if there's something in like one of the street names that replaced with the whole word drive that wasn't supposed to. And the same thing will happen with avenue if you change AVE to avenue. So when you're doing those, just kind of pay attention to what's going on there and notice, do a quick scroll to see if you see any of those issues. We'll do the same thing with circle. And it doesn't look like any of them were already circles, so we didn't get any circles. ST is one that you can commonly screw up because there are STs in like low stream. If we were to replace all the STs with street, then you'll see this all of a sudden becomes low street stream. So you might just need to replace that a little bit. This can seem a little complicated, and this is the most difficult part, but it really does not take as long as emailing them back, waiting for them to fix it, etc., especially if they're not very tech savvy. This Estes Road, and this is Stonecliff Road. So we're gonna get rid of that and Wagstaff Street. So the ST is one that we'll get, yeah. Now we have a period after here. Since we only have one, I'm just gonna delete it. Sometimes just doing stuff manually is great. We only have, I think, one avenue. We have one road that needs to be fixed, and then we are all good there. Lastly, we have city, state, zip, all in the same column. So what I'm going to use here is data, and it's called split text to columns. I'm almost always going to use this separator of detect automatically, or I'll very often use space. There are other options if you want to. For instance, if there is a comma after everything, you could use a comma. Now, the main issue here is that sometimes the cities are separated by space. So now we have states in different columns, zip codes in different columns, etc. So I'm going to change this one to state and this one to zip. And I'll use some sorting filters to make this a little bit easier. Now in the state column, we have states and numbers. If the city had 2 words, then we have a state in this column. If the city had 1 word, we have a zip code in this column, and that's a number. So if we sort this A to Z, we're gonna very easily separate all the ones that had zip codes in this column and all the ones that had states in this column. So I'm just going to grab all of these zip codes and paste them in the zip code column. And then all of the states that are over here, I'm gonna paste them in that state column. So now we're a little bit closer. Now with this size of address list, you could just then write them out. Pine Trail, if you just click enter twice, it will make that next cell available for editing. So if you just click enter, now I can type in the other one. However, this does open you up to making mistakes with typing. If you have a really long address list, they could take a while. So what I'm going to do is, it's a concatenate feature, but basically it's just combining those 2 cells. So over here, I'm going to put equals, include the first cell that I want. And then this is the only confusing part. So and quote, and then you'll put anything you want between the 2 words in the quotes. So we'll just put a space here, close out the quotes, close out the and then click the next thing that you want. And as you can see right here, it says Pleasant Garden with a space in the middle. That's exactly what we want. We'll press enter. And then if you copy this or drag it all the way down, it's going to do the same thing for those. And you can see like Townsend didn't have another one, so it didn't include anything there. Now to get these into the right column, we're just going to copy them. And what you want to do is paste values only. So that takes away the fact that this is referencing these other cells, and it's just going to paste the text. So paste special, values only. And now we have all of those cities there, and we can just delete this entire column. We have our states, we have our zip codes, we have our cities. Now in this particular one, we have 1 state spelled out. So I'm just going to change that to MD, or if you were going the opposite way, then you could use that find and replace. So for instance, a lot of wedding invitation lists are going to have a lot of people from the same states. So as you see here, there's a lot of North Carolina. So we're just going to find NC and replace it with North Carolina. Again, you have some of these weird things like IN is the abbreviation for Indiana, and it's also in North Carolina. So if you can do Indiana before you do North Carolina, it's going to be a little more effective, but you can always look through and it's going to be very obvious if you accidentally have North Carolina, Indiana. It's going to be very obvious. So you can go through and just click replace all, and we got like most of them in there. So then if we just do Pennsylvania, and then for things like Maryland, Florida, sometimes I just like will type it one time. So I'll just type out Pennsylvania and then just grab that and copy it down one, and then do Maryland. I'm typing really poorly while I'm talking to you. Florida, copy, paste. Tennessee, Wisconsin, Colorado, Arizona. Okay, and that took like 30 seconds for me to do that whole thing. Of course, it's a little longer if you have 250, but you know, using that find and replace is really easy. Another thing that you might want to do, let's see, we have this Wisconsin that was lowercase. So if you do want to change it to all uppercase, you can just click upper, click this, and then it will change, you know, that entire column to uppercase. So for instance, if I copy this down over here, it's going to change that whole column to uppercase. You can do the same thing with lower or sentence case. In this case, we only have one that's lowercase, so it's really easy to just fix it. And then the last thing that we don't have any issues here on this spreadsheet, but if you do have someone from like Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, etc., then when you type in their zip code that starts with a 0, oftentimes it deletes the 0 because it's formatting as a number. There's a few different ways you can combat this. So if you put a apostrophe in front of the O, then it won't delete it. Or if you format the entire column and instead of number, you just do plain text, then it's going to go over to the left like text. And when you put in a 0, it's not going to delete. So a couple of different options there. That's something I always try to look at to make sure the client didn't screw that up. A couple last things I'm noticing are just some commas here that we don't necessarily want. You could delete them one by one because there's 3 of them, or you can just replace all, and we're pretty much good to go. Something that doesn't matter at all is going to be the different like size text format, etc. When you download this to do a data merge, it's not going to matter what the format of the actual font, etc. is. It's just going to matter the text that's in there. One additional thing you might want to do is insert a column for the apartment. Just depends on how you're formatting your addresses. Since there's only 2 here, I'm just going to kind of type them out. 431 and delete this. You can also very easily just copy and paste it over if there's not very many. And then you could do a find and replace for APT, change it to apartment. One thing I sometimes do is also just copy this text and then kind of paste it between the APT as I go down. So it just spells the word apartment. Okay, but not with that T. I get nervous when I'm doing this on video for you guys. Depending on the size of your address list and how many there are, you could also do that split text to columns and then bring all of the street names back together and keep the apartments in a different column. It can get a little more complicated with street names because, as you can see, this is 3 separate words, whereas this one is 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of them might even be 5. So that part that we showed you where we combined all of the 2-word town names can get a little more complicated when you're talking about streets. But if you have a really long list where they've put all the apartments there, you can either ask them to separate it, or you can absolutely use that option, and it really doesn't take that much time. Okay, so this video was like 16 minutes with me screwing up, repeating things, having to explain things to you and think about what I'm doing in a different way. So if we were actually doing this, it really would only take like 10, 12 minutes usually, and it can be so helpful to your clients, especially if you're charging a luxury amount for your invitations. This is something that you can do that just makes it feel really easy for them, as opposed to sending it back and feeling a little bit nitpicky. Of course, if this is something that you just don't want to do, or you're not really charging enough to take an extra 15 minutes of time, etc., then you can always send it back to them and let them know how they feel. This is a point where you might want to either do the merge and send them a proof, or you could send them this file and say, this is exactly what we're going to print. Please make sure that we did everything correctly, etc., because it's just another chance for them to notice any errors that you wouldn't notice, such as name misspellings or putting families with the wrong people, etc. Now, once this address list is cleaned up, you can turn it into a lovely data merge file. I'll link the tutorial to explain how to do that in Adobe InDesign. I also have a tutorial of how to do this in Adobe Illustrator, but InDesign is by far my favorite. And you'll be able to connect all of these different lines in the spreadsheet with different fonts, colors, spacing, sizing, etc., to make them look as beautiful as you want for printing your envelope addresses. Let me know what questions you have about cleaning up your address list. Getting familiar with Excel sheets, numbers, etc. can just change your life in so many ways when you're an invitation designer. So absolutely check this out. And I'm sure some of you will have some tips that I didn't even cover, or easier or different ways to do some of the things that I mentioned. So feel free to leave those below.